Hello and welcome. The protests in Hong Kong are intensifying. Clashes erupted after thousands of pro-democracy demonstrators in Hong Kong gathered for a 13th consecutive weekend defying a police ban. The protesters lighted a fire on the steps outside a police station in Hong Kong. And for more in this developing story, I'm now joined by WION World is One's very own Patrick Falk, who is standing by in Hong Kong as we speak. Patrick, good evening to you. Where exactly are you standing and what's happening around you as we speak? Describe to us the situation in Hong Kong this evening.
Well, this is a very tense situation indeed. I'm right in the middle of Causeway Bay, which is a key shopping district where a lot of the protesters have gathered now. We are actually standing in front of a tram station that some protesters are trying to light at this moment. And at this very time, police are also advancing from Wan Chai to the west. And many of the protesters have been backing down along the way towards North Point. And if you look behind me, you can perhaps see some of them in the distance there. They do seem to be trying to hold their ground, and they are creating havoc around the area. They are digging up bricks from the ground and breaking them in half to make them easier to throw. There's also a lot of banging you can hear going on metal railings. And there's also some arguments going on with some of the people in the neighborhood, some people that don't support what they're doing. We have been seeing people shine laser lights at some windows up there at the moment. But as I say, it's a very tense situation indeed right now.
And Patrick, we were discussing about the violence and the casualties arising out of these protests this weekend. It's the 13th straight weekend of protests. What are you hearing about the violence elsewhere in the city, and where are the Chinese soldiers as we speak? Are they still in their barracks, or are they out threatening to quell these protests anytime soon?
Well, I think the police have made quite an effort to show that they are capable of handling this situation right now. And, we have seen, although the police are really heavily outnumbered, they certainly have the force and the capacity to handle these protests turning violent. This day started out as being a relatively peaceful rally. Of course, it was an illegal assembly. The police had said that they weren't allowed to have this demonstration. But, given what's happened over the last 24 hours, we expected some sort of activity to take place. And, that then descended into chaos in Central and Admiralty earlier on. The police were firing several rounds of tear gas. They even used the water cannon, and they've continued to advance throughout the night. As I say, they've been pushing the protesters westwards, and it's gotten really very violent indeed. And, there's an argument that perhaps had the police allowed the original protest to go ahead, that perhaps this wouldn't have happened. This is a clear act of defiance from the protesters, and they aren't happy, and there's no way that this situation is going to die down given the present circumstances.
Indeed. And very quickly, Patrick, now you spoke about the police ban and the demonstrators defying that police ban. Now, we heard from Beijing yesterday saying that it won't sit on the sidelines if situation worsens. We also read about reports about Beijing rejecting Carrie Lam's offer or proposal of withdrawing the extradition bill, which is still very much on the table, so to speak. So where is the local authority, where is Carrie Lam as we speak, and what can we expect going forward, especially tomorrow when the protests continue?
Well, it's a really good question. Given that bombshell report that was issued, basically saying that the chief executive advised the central government that withdrawing the bill was the way to defuse the crisis. A lot of people are asking, well, what do we have a chief executive for at all in Hong Kong now? It's quite clear to many people, the way that they see it, that Carrie Lam has no authority or no autonomy to lead Hong Kong. And for them, many people out here, that is an example of the central government undermining the principle of one country, two systems. And that's partly, one might argue, what spurred the intensity of today's protests that have taken place. And as we know, there's a lot more activity to take place in the days to come. There is meant to be an airport protest that's going to take place tomorrow. So we are likely perhaps to see some more travel disruption, perhaps for international travellers as well. And there are strikes planned for the beginning of next week, as well as class boycotts for students who are meant to be going back to school at the start of September.
Patrick, I want to come to you one more time before we wrap up this conversation. Now, we've heard about protests happening in Hong Kong earlier this evening. Barricade being set on fire, mass arrests taking place through the day. Where are the pro-democracy activists, especially Joshua Wong and Agnes Shah, for instance? Are they still on not taking part in the protest because of the bail conditions? So what are we hearing about the violence as we speak, and where this protest might be headed the 13th weekend as we speak?
Well, look, Joshua Wong and Agnes Chow, they've been let out on bail. They are not allowed out between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. in the morning. They're not allowed around Admiralty, where a lot of the activity took place today as well. But look, there was a wave of arrests against prominent opposition figures. And again, that is something else that has spurred the intensity of the protests today. But, you know, it's very hard to say where this movement's going to go. You know, there are reports saying that China did want the unrest to die down by the beginning of September. That's quite clearly not going to happen. There is a concern now that this could spill over to the October 1st celebrations of the anniversary of the founding of the PRC. And it does seem as though there is no end in sight at this time. And as we've said many times before, that a lot of people feel that the only way to end this crisis is with a political solution, but that just hasn't been forthcoming.
Indeed, as Patrick Kwok is pointing out, in Hong Kong this evening as we speak, there's no end in sight to the protest. It's the 13th straight weekend of protests by the pro-democracy activists, and that there seems to be no political solution either to this protracted problem. On that note, Patrick Kwok in Hong Kong, thank you so much for that update, and we'll keep coming back to you for more on this developing story.